Is Saraya overrated as a wrestler? Is professional wrestling still Saraya's house? Saraya, also known as Paige in her WWE days, is no doubt one of the biggest names in women's wrestling. She was the youngest WWE Divas champion of all time at 21, playing a pioneering role in ushering in a new era of women's wrestling around the women's revolution, and even had a movie about her life released worldwide that was directed by The Rock, where she was played by a young Florence Pugh. Her story is certainly inspirational, coming back from a career-ending neck injury against all odds to grace the ring again. But after a huge AEW world title win in front of a home crowd at Wembley Stadium wasn't received well in the aftermath, things haven't exactly felt smooth lately. Yes, I know some people will think I'm crazy for asking if she's overrated, but the question has to be asked since she recently lost her AEW Women's Championship to Hikaru Shida. With questions rising over her very brief AEW title reign and in-ring ability in 2023, stick around as we debate the question, is Saraya overrated? Make no doubts about it, Saraya really did earn things the hard way. Born into the Knight wrestling family in Norwich, England, and tirelessly working the British and European wrestling circuits from the age of 13. These early experiences not only laid the foundation for her, but have been an important part of her identity as a wrestler. She was known as the girl who'd not been handpicked by the WWE because of her diva looks at a time when women's wrestlers weren't typically scouted from the indies, but someone whose wrestling credentials backed up her success. In order to consider if someone's overrated, it's important to consider what their reputation is. And what is Saraya's reputation? Undoubtedly, it's that of a figure who was incredibly important in the changing of the guard in modern women's wrestling. A unique character or personality with good wrestling ability who earned it the hard way, coming up in a wrestling family in the indies and made good. But the comparisons between her past glory and current status ignites the discussion of whether it's time to reassess how good she really is. Some might ask the question, was Paige's early success due to her uniqueness in a less competitive landscape? Or is that a testament to her exceptional talent and potential? In her WWE days, we can all agree that Paige did have the advantage of flourishing in the company during a time where her being different to your typical diva allowed her to separate herself from the others, with her unique look and style tied nicely with her in-ring abilities. And that if she'd arrived slightly later, she wouldn't have had that advantage in a locker room full of more unique women's wrestlers at a higher skill level than the competition was at the time when she was at her peak. Others would argue that this is revisionist history, with her impact in earlier career work being underappreciated. She is the youngest NXT Women's Champion of all time for a reason, you know? Her famed match with Emma at NXT Arrival was one which was lauded by fans at a time when divas typically only got 2 to 3 minutes in ring. This marked the start of something new for the future of women's wrestling in WWE. The match was quite honestly top tier in my opinion, and really began the buzz for what the future of women's wrestling could look like. But some would argue that it was really good for the time, and when compared to modern standards, not to say that it hasn't aged gracefully, but this match doesn't seem like anything special compared to some really high quality matches we're seeing today in the women's division, in both WWE and AEW brands. While possibly true, I think it would be harsh to not appreciate it for the groundbreaking match that it was, especially by standards that weren't set at the time. And quite simply, her achievements in the WWE can't be overstated. She was on top of the world at a time where WWE was still trying to figure out how to reconstruct the women's to a more PG version, even after 7 years removed from their last bra and panty match in 2007. Her main roster debut on Raw the night after WrestleMania 30 marked her unveiling to the world in an iconic moment which saw her interrupt AJ Lee to congratulate her on her title defense before an impromptu match in which Paige became the Divas champion. It was a watershed moment that made her the only woman to hold the main roster and NXT Women's Championship simultaneously. It's fitting that it was AJ of all people, another true pioneer with many similarities to Paige in her uniqueness. And it's a moment that feels pivotal because although the women's revolution hadn't arrived yet, it was a sign of things to come. Her second Divas champion reign would come shortly after that moment at SummerSlam with a win over AJ Lee. But many would argue that the years that followed were underwhelming, with a lack of great matches or huge moments to her name, before a recurring neck injury forced her into retirement in 2018. After nearly 5 years out of the ring, it's no surprise that her return to wrestling competition in AEW was met with a ton of buzz and excitement. But with that has come a lot of expectation too, especially since Bryan Danielson and Edge had successfully come out of retirement to grace the squared circle again, and not only deliver quality work, but high activity too. This is where it feels things have turned against Saraya. Many feel that there's been a lack of good matches, activity, and promos. In her first promo back, she took shots at the WWE, stating, "It's good to have a boss that finally listens to me," something which many felt contradicted prior comments by Saraya and was cheap shock value. Saraya stated she regrets the line and was asked to say it, stating, "I got asked to say a certain sentence. The sentence where I was like, finally, a boss that listens to me. I wish I didn't take that low-hanging fruit." With her first year back not lighting the world on fire, many also feel that AEW's booking of the women's division hasn't exactly helped. The sentiment towards Saraya's work specifically is at arguably an all-time low. Saraya won her first world title in nearly 9 years by defeating AEW Women's World Champion Hikaru Shida, Britt Baker, and Outcast stablemate Toni Storm in a fatal 4-way match at All In her home country, and in an emotional moment with her family at the iconic Wembley Stadium. That decision was heavily criticized, with many believing it was more about the big moment than being a smart booking. And an underwhelming 44-day title reign, which ended with her losing the title back to Shida, was met with constant criticism, and really hasn't helped her stock value with the fans. In fact, to many, it validated what they already felt. It's also very possible that her social media activity is impacting her reputation. She's faced controversy with fans over her partner, lead singer of the rock band Falling in Reverse, Ronnie Radke, whose past is extremely controversial, and she recently caused backlash, no pun intended, in her response to fan criticism over what she described as being a heel. After a bout featuring Toni Storm, Nyla Rose, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and Hikaru Shida, a fan critiqued her saying, "I'm sorry, that women's 4-way was terrible. All 4 of them look so sloppy. Shit happens, but damn, I was hoping for more both in time and in quality." Saraya's response? Going through your Twitter. "So you just talk shit on women in general. Makes sense though, you're hideous. Always the ugly ones. Hashtag I'm your champion." That caused a wave of backlash, to which she doubled down, branding it as being a heel, stating, "People want you to be a heel until you're actually a heel. Then they're like, no, not like that, you're too mean." Wrestling Twitter is so soft. It's because it's a bunch of misogynistic neckbeards or stans accounts who can't tell a wrist lock from a padlock, but they keep following everything I do. Watch my tweets, check my likes, search my name, keep me trending. That's showbiz, baby. While some might label this heel work, it's things like this that encapsulate how so much of what she's doing right now really isn't connecting with the fans. It isn't a lost cause though, and she does have the ability to turn the tide, but a reset and a big change of direction is needed in my opinion. And that brings us back to the question, is Saraya overrated? I think it depends on your context of overrated. If we're talking about Saraya as we speak today, you may very well might find her to be overrated, standing next to the reputation that preceded her. She hasn't set the world on fire with her character work in AEW, doesn't have many memorable promos, and while she's able to put on solid matches, hasn't kept up the in-ring level of performance compared to some of her peers, and had a disappointing world title reign. Is that harsh considering how her inactivity that's likely linked to her neck injury has limited her in that aspect? Probably, at least on the in-ring and activity aspect. But looking at her career as a whole, I don't think it's smart or fair to underplay the impact she's had. She is the only woman to have won women's world championships in both WWE and AEW, and to hold both a main roster and NXT Women's Championship simultaneously in WWE. She played an important role in bringing women's wrestling mainstream with Fighting With My Family, and was a sign of the changing of the guard as the fresh-faced gothic chick who wasn't like the rest of the roster when she arrived from NXT into the spotlight of the WWE main roster. Did she reach her potential as being the great wrestler she was expected to be after that? Possibly not. In my opinion, the women's revolution started with her, but was continued and solidified by those that followed very shortly after and admired her during the start of the business. Saraya was the one that started the fire, but not the one to take things to the next level. So if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you feel we've been fair or harsh, as well as your thoughts on Saraya. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.